Today's focus will be on the SAP Engineering Control Center. We know quite a few of you online. There are some new names in the meeting as well. But main goal for today is actually to keep it quite interactive. So our agenda for today is to first provide you an introduction and quick overview on LeverX. Again, most of you know us already, but for the new names in the meeting, we'll do a quick introduction. Then we'll get right to point 2, which is taking a look at SAP ECTR 5.1 and the fact that this will be out of maintenance end of 2021. We will highlight the path for the upgrade to SAP ECTR 5.2. So that is our main goal for today, main objective, to provide you all the information that you need to successfully plan and prepare for the upgrade before the software is out of maintenance. Then we'll take a look at a live demo. So I will hand it over to Bill. He will show you a couple features, what's new, what's interesting live in the system, utilizing SAP ECTR 5.2. And then we will open it up for discussion. So all of your mics will be unmuted. And we would like to ask you at that point, which will be about at the 30-minute mark, to just raise your hand. You can do this via the Q&A panel in the GoToWebinar. You can raise your hand, and then we will just call on you to ask your question, and then hopefully we can have a bit of an open forum discussion here, with also maybe having the chance to connect with one another, since we have a variety of different SAP customers on the line that are working with similar tools but making variety of different products. So that's the agenda for today. With this, we'll get right into the presentation. My name is Christoph Fischer, Director of SAP R&D Engineering and PLM Solutions as part of the digital supply chains. I'm based out of our LeverX King of Prussia, Pennsylvania office. And with me is Bill Svokos, Principal SAP ECTR and PLM Consultant, also based out of King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. And then we'll get started. So again, for those that know us already, some of this might still be new to you because we did have some exciting developments here in the past few months. So as you can see, most of you have worked with us out of our US offices. So LeverX has its headquarters in Mountain View, California. We have our key development and delivery center out of Troy, Michigan. And then our ECTR specialist group is based out of King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, where Bill and myself are based out of. We are rapidly expanding across Europe as well. So we have various new offices planned to open later this year across Germany, Latvia, Czech Republic, and others. We already opened offices in Poland, Ukraine, and other locations to really support as a global end-to-end partner your global projects. So LeverX now has grown to over 1,000 employees, 18 plus years, very close collaboration with SAP, especially in the PLM domain. That includes the Engineering Control Center. And what we strive to do is really be your partner for the end-to-end global delivery of your projects. So these can be very large projects from beginning to end. These can be upgrade projects like the ECTR 5.1 to 5.2 upgrade, which are much smaller, much more manageable within a short time frame. But the key takeaway, we can support you in a variety of different big, small, medium-sized projects within the SAP solution scope. One area that we also like to highlight is our strategic involvement with SAP, as well as our core expertise. So on the left-hand side here, you see just a couple snapshots of our strategic development partnership with SAP. So not only do we deliver projects to our SAP customers, but we also develop software for SAP very strategically. This actually goes even beyond the PLM solution portfolio. So as an example, we are involved in development of SAP digital supply chain solutions like yard logistics. We're heavily involved with delivery of EWM and TM, transportation management projects. And then some of the familiar PLM solutions like EPD, the new S/4HANA change record, or the enterprise portfolio project management solution. These are all, again, SAP products where LeverX is involved strategically with co-development, co-innovation, and ultimately leading us to be your strategic partner for the delivery of these solutions as well. Another key part, which involves our core expertise, and it's very relevant for the upgrade here that we'll get to in just a minute, are our people, our resources here at LeverX. So if you look at the top right here, our consultants, they come from industry, they come with a CAD background, so they are really experts in the engineering as well as the SAP space. Bill, as an example, who will run us through the live demo today, has a background in SolidWorks, Inventor, AutoCAD, Creo, and CATIA. So before he became an SAP PLM consultant, he was a mechanical engineer specializing in CAD design. So having that real-world industry know-how and experience ultimately helps lead to more successful project deliveries and implementations for you, the customer. And that is also relevant for the smaller projects like the 5.1 to 5.2 upgrades. The other area that we bring core expertise to is in the area of development. So that includes SAP development, including ABAP, Fiori, as well as basis activities, but also non-SAP development like .NET, Java, Python, and others. We are also heavily involved with automation and robotics, including programming of cobots. So really leveraging technology as part of that digital transformation thread is part of our core mission. The other side of our business, outside of really project delivery and being a strategic partner to SAP, is that we develop software to help your systems run better, more efficiently, and become ultimately more flexible. So to put you in charge of your system and your product lifecycle process. Part of that here is the software that LeverX develops. So here are four main software products. IPS is maybe one you're most familiar with, really to simplify and accelerate your SAP workflow, business process automation. So the simplest use case within our PLM domain, which is relevant for most of you, is engineering change management. So IPS is a very flexible, easy to deploy tool to manage your engineering changes and then extend these beyond, for example, to integrate quality processes, manufacturing deviations, and everything that's ultimately influenced by the engineering design. BMax, one step down, is the product for extending your master data. So utilizing a rules-driven process to extend material masters and bills of materials to other plants that are part of your production. Then the IQ series, another step down, is to simplify that user experience across SAP, leveraging the power of Fiori apps, making product data easily accessible as part of the overall SAP user base. And then last but not least, VLOX for system integration. So SAP, non-SAP systems that need to talk, need to communicate. So together with our strategic development partnership of SAP, with our resources, and then with these accelerators, we really bring together that end-to-end delivery process. With all of this in mind now, let's move on to the key agenda for today, which is SAP's ECTR 5.1, which is out of maintenance at the end of 2021. So most of you are familiar with the SAP Engineering Control Center. Again, we refer to it as ECTR to continue with the theme of using acronyms in the SAP world. What ECTR is, really, it's an engineering workspace for managing CAD and non-CAD data. It's very powerful in the fact that it has CAD interfaces for all the major MCAD electrical CAD and electronic CAD solutions. So from SolidWorks to Creo, Inventor, AutoCAD, to electrical CAD like ePlan or AutoCAD electrical, SolidWorks electrical, to more of the electronic CAD in the ECAD world like Cadence, Mentor, Altium. All of this data can be directly integrated with SAP. Non-CAD data, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, PDFs can be managed efficiently utilizing that power of the interface of ECTR. So ultimately, we bring it under full PDM, PLM control. We allow access for that global engineering data, access to the live business data, all of this fully integrated into the supply chain, including link to material masters, bill of materials, and very important, again, bringing all of this under an engineering change control and SAP workflow really built in. Now, the beauty of the ECTR is you can even start that workflow directly out of this engineering domain, which quite often is at the very beginning of your product design. What you just saw pop in on the right-hand side are the workflows that are pre-built, easily modified, allowing for visual monitoring, and can be designed for business users directly out of ECTR. So a lot of power within the SAP Engineering Control Center, and again, further enhanced with some of our products and with the upgrades that we're talking about here. So the main message we wanted to get to all ECTR customers is that 5.1 is out of maintenance at the end of this year. So think of it like a reminder. So we want to make sure that you're aware of the roadmap, that you're aware of the maintenance, and that you can plan accordingly, because we're middle of June right now. So it definitely is the right time to take a look at this. So key message, ECTR 5.1 is out of maintenance, end of 2021. ECTR 5.2 is available on Enhancement Pack 7 and higher. The upgrade beginning to end will take roughly 3 months, and the time to plan is now. So that way you can close out the year being on the latest and greatest and not having to worry about any maintenance issues. So that's our key objective, is to first off make you aware, and then second, to show you the path for the upgrade to SAP ECTR 5.2. There are a lot of benefits leveraging this newer version of ECTR. It's part, if you're an ECTR customer already, this is part of your maintenance. You get access to the new software release. So we, of course, encourage you to leverage that. For any non-SAP ECTR customers on the webinar today, hopefully this will show you a little bit more about the possibilities. For any CAD desktop customers on the call, I just flipped the screen here so you can see a functional overview or comparison chart of ECTR versus CAD desktop. Because again, if you are to move on to ECTR as a net new customer, you get the latest and greatest 5.2 release or the compatible release for S/4HANA. So you can leverage all of this. A couple highlights here. This new version of ECTR 5.2, as mentioned, now is backwards compatible to EHP7. So SAP put in this work to make it more easily achievable for customers to upgrade. There are also the integrations to the variety of electrical tools available now. One big use case has been SolidWorks electrical. So if you're a SolidWorks mechanical customer working with ECTR, we encourage you to take a look at SolidWorks electrical as well. Very powerful, very convenient. The SAP Enterprise Product Development window for live collaboration is now directly integrated within ECTR. So another really nice feature that's made available, and variety of other topics here. Just in the interest of time, I won't go through all of them, but on the Wiki page, you can find a lot of great information. So SAP keeps this very up to date, continuously provides additional new notes and information. So definitely take a look at this link. Now let's take a look at the tasks, the effort, and resources involved to complete the upgrade. Before I get into this, a quick note, we will send the slide decks to you, so you will have this material to look through it in more detail. And again, at the end of this webinar, or before the end, we will unmute everybody so we can have an interactive discussion. But just quickly, the key tasks here, you have about 10 tasks. These are really split between the client activities and the LeverX activities. So who does it involve? Overall, it involves the client basis team. It involves LeverX as the partner. It involves the client IT, and then the client subject matter experts with knowledge of the CAD packages. In total, there are around 100 hours of effort involved from a LeverX side. There's less involvement from the client side overall. And the steps to go through this, you can read here in the descriptions, are fairly typical project steps, from updating your dev components to applying the ECTR notes for the latest 5.2 release, to installing the latest ECTR CAD interface, preparing that overall distribution package, updating configuration, running through validation and development, planning the cutover to quality, validation of quality, and then ultimately the go live. So it's not a very involved project. It's very manageable, and we've done many of these because all ECTR customers are in the same boat. So we can run through this very efficiently. Again, as far as key resources, there's really only one consultant required from the LeverX side. And then from the client side, there's overall project management, if that's something that you generally would like to have involvement in. But then primary resources are technical basis, the subject matter expert, an ECTR CAD admin, and then a technical IT admin. And you can see by the utilization percentage, it's not very involved, so very manageable. Next, we'll take a look at the upgrade steps and the timeline. So there are two parts to it. This one a little bit more high level, but we wanted to really show you, present to you what is involved with this upgrade. So first off, blueprint, that's where we get together, take a look at your business requirements, create a blueprint and get sign off so we all understand we're all on the same page of what we need to achieve. For this upgrade, it's fairly straightforward. Key objective is to upgrade from 5.1 to 5.2 to make sure you continue to remain on the maintenance, on the warranty, but also to make sure you can leverage the latest and greatest functionality of ECTR. Then we get into realization. That's the bulk of the activities, of the project activities. So here we install the new interface, we update the baseline configuration, we provide basic training or baseline training, we complete the unit testing of the solution, we will document all the configuration changes, the enhancements. If you have special enhancements, we'll take care of that. And then we sign off on the configuration and start testing. And that moves us into the final prep, where we start to really take a look at the integration and go through UAT, user acceptance testing. We resolve any open issues. We create the cutover list, and then we move into go live. Go live, pretty straightforward. Most of you are familiar with this from the previous CAD Desktop or ECTR projects. So we bring you live. Overall timeline, we're looking at 8 to 10 week timeline. Of course, depends a little bit if you have one CAD system, if you have 2 different CAD systems, or 4, or even more than that. But even with customers that are running on 4 different CAD systems, generally the timeline will be up to 10 weeks, and that's it. Main takeaway with the timeline, if you think about, okay, 10 weeks, maybe 3 months, we're at the middle of June, maintenance runs out end of this year. It's definitely the right time to plan. Of course, there's budgetary planning that needs to be done, resource planning. So again, that's why we, in a way, strategically wanted to set the webinar up at this time to make that known to all of you. Upgrade steps and timeline part 2. This is a little bit more detail. I won't go through all of it. We just covered it already, but you can see here a little bit the schedule for week by week with the project for this upgrade. So with the kickoff, week 1, blueprint, week 2, realization, week 3, UAT, week 4 and 5, cut over week 6, go live week 7 or 8. So again, that's roughly the rundown. Very methodical approach, and as long as your resources are available, our resource is part of the project team from the very beginning through the end, then these are very, I will call it very easy projects to start, to manage, and to deliver. So with this, I will stop sharing at this point, and then Bill will take a look at the system live. And after that, we'll open it up for questions. So Bill, at this point,
sure,
I will stop sharing.
All right. And I will present. Give me just one moment while I get the presenting. Okay.
And while Bill is pulling this up, again, in a few minutes, we will open it up for questions. So we will unmute everyone, and you can just raise your hand via that GoToWebinar panel, and then we will go down, name by name, and talk through your discussion points or questions. The last note from my side, if there are customers on the line who are already upgraded to 5.2, we still encourage you to ask any questions if you want to hear a little bit more about new features, or just take the opportunity to speak with Phil about any questions you have. So we definitely want to keep it interactive towards the end of it.
Yep. Can everybody see my screen, Chris?
Yes, Phil, I can see it. I can hear you.
Okay, great. So hello, everyone. I'm not going to go through a whole big demonstration of the Engineering Control Center as a whole. I'm more or less going to highlight just a few of the features that you get with a 5.1 to a 5.2, some of the new features and things like that. But I want to preface, a lot of the changes from 5.1 to 5.2 and the improvements are more on back-end functionality and just overall user experience and things like that. There are indeed some new functions that are added in 5.2 versus 5.1, but some of them are much less, apparent just from the UI or just from buttons and clicks and things like that. They're more improvements that have been allowed through that changeover between the two softwares, the 5.1 versus 5.2 architecture itself. And I also wanted to note that it's kind of also a better transitional period into the S/4HANA world of things as well, because 5.2 is being more tailored to being able to kind of transition over into that S/4HANA experience when you get there. So a lot of the functions are similar across the board. And one of the biggest things is, as Chris said before, so 5.2 is now supported in EHP 7, but it was explicitly only in EHP 8 up until recently, which is basically why it was that kind of stepping off period into S4, kind of like how EHP 8 for SAP was kind of that transitional period. Customers on EHP 8 had a much easier transition into S4 HANA than they would have if they were in previous releases. Now, that being said, just want to go through, like I said, just some basic functions in the Engineering Control Center that may be useful. One, and I kind of have the buttons in the 5.1 configuration for some as well, so we can kind of see the differences. So in 5.1, we've always had this kind of quick search where you can enter the search criteria and it would go and find any indexes on basically what you searched for. Now in 5.2, they've added a more advanced, or let's call it more rounded quick search, and you can see that over here. So there's a start quick search. There's a completely new option. You can also have a hotkey for Control Q, which is what I'll press on my keyboard. And it is very similar, except it has the ability, first of all, to change the amount of maximum hits, which is nice, where the other one was limited just based on config, what your maximum hits were. But now, as a user, I have the ability to change how many hits my search will do. And it also searches across different objects. So it is not just, for documents as it was before. It is now for documents, materials, and change masters as well. So in other words, other objects that exist within the SAP system. So to kind of show how that works, first I'll stick with, I'll just have it as doc for starters. I'm just going to run the search test, nothing special. So here we go. We can see these are all just documents. If I switch to material, it'll then change my test results here, and just give it a second while it reprocesses. And oh, there you go. That's what I wanted to do. So then I can toggle them on and off for which ones I want to see. So there are my results for test for material, and the same thing goes for ECN. And then if I do all, it'll basically show me a list of the first 50 that hit, right? Okay. So basically the quick search gives us a lot more capabilities for searching, which I know is the thing that a lot of customers were looking into in the past. Now, another thing that is available, Chris actually mentioned in there, so there is some more advanced capabilities in the Assemblies window. Now, granted, this assembly is not that large, but before we were able to do kind of a quick search here where, for example, if I wanted to search for anything with the words M8 in it, it would kind of highlight them, right? Which is fine and dandy, but they've added a little bit more nicer interface, let's call it, where it comes across the top here, and I can still do M8, and I can also do, you know, transition to the next one and the next one and so on, or just find all and it'll highlight them all in one shot. So it basically took that searching capability that I had in my structure and made it a little bit more progressive, a little bit more user-friendly, which for customers that have, you know, larger assemblies, you know, 100, 1,000 part assemblies, this is extremely beneficial because now you're able to basically search through that structure from here without having another window pop up somewhere else and typing the search, etc. You can kind of do it all from inside this window. And also, depending on the version of 5.1 that you're currently running, there's a lot more filtering capabilities in the Assemblies window as well. Now, these were offered as well in 5.1, but it really depends on if you're on a newer version of 5.1 versus a later one. Another key function that I wanted to show was, and I'm just gonna switch to this window layout real quick. So I have an assembly here that has a BOM and so on. There has been different variations of the material BOM derivation in the Engineering Control Center. There has been a much nicer, cleaner, and better user experience that has been developed in 5.2, which is the MBomb Wizard. And with the MBomb Wizard, what this brings up is, first of all, you make the choice here, as opposed to having two options that you had before. You can choose right from the start whether you want to derive it for all levels or just a single level, part of your BOM. Then you get to choose change numbers that you want to apply to the bill of materials itself. Do you want to use the one that's already attached to the document? Do you want to use the active change number, which would be here? Or do you just want to choose another change number from the system? You have those capabilities. Then also, you have the ability to distinguish your plant and your usage, and you're able to search for those on the fly. Whereas before, in the Engineering Control Center, you didn't really have that flexibility to pick plant and usage. It was kind of built into the configuration and static. And if you wanted to make differences or changes based off of, you know, into the system, into your ECTR system, it had to be done by the ECTR admin, part of the config, and rolled out. Now it's just, you know, you can come here and select your plant. Now, granted, it's still going to follow the standard rules that you have within SAP for plants and materials and BOMs. So in other words, the materials that are going to go into the BOM, the material masters have to be in that plant and so on. So you still have those requirements, but you do have the ability, if everything is maintained correctly, to create a BOM with plant. Same thing goes for usage. You can pick whatever usage you want from inside the system and create it, right? Okay, and then when we hit OK here, I just kind of wanted to show what the UI looks like as well. So now, before it was an SAP GUI UI, which had some jumbled information. It wasn't really 100% understood what everything was. Here we kind of have a much nicer layout of everything, including what each of the items are and nice icons. And not only that, you also have the ability to change this layout on the fly. So you can decide, you know, what's the different information that you actually want to see in this and things like that. So it's basically a much nicer user interface. All in all, the BOM generation itself, and I'm sorry for that. There we go. And this is only for my system, so my apologies, I have a pop-up. But they're basically, you're able to create your bill of materials. Not only that, it also gives you an indicator inside of the Engineering Control Center when it was created and when it was updated and so on, which was another thing before it just kind of faded out. So nicer functionality there. One of the last things that I wanted to show, this way we have enough time to open it up to questions and so on, is there is, and I'm going to switch back to a model that has 2 versions in it. There is a BOM comparison and in 5.2, which is more for like the document structures themselves. So if I were to click BOM comparison while having 2 of my versions selected, it brings up, again, it isn't a GUI screen, but it brings up a comparison between the items that are within the document. So now we can see which parts are identical and which parts are new and so on. So we can kind of see from here. So there were 2 version 0s from these version 00. So that's the difference between my 2 document structures, top levels that I picked on those assemblies. So again, a nice thing that's easily a nice easy way to compare 2 structures. Again, if the larger your structures, the more useful this could potentially be, especially if you're trying to see what may have changed in my assembly structure from version 0 to version 1, A to B, whatever scheme you're using, but what the changes were and what those transitions were. I think the last topic that I wanted to cover was so GOS objects have been something that is available in both 5.1 and 5.2 in their functionality. However, one of the things that 5.2 is allowing is the ability to drag and drop and create links between the GOS objects and other objects inside of SAP. So that means, and that's something for those of you that saw the webinar that we did on the IPS integration into ECTR. That's one of the functionalities that in our releases of the integration with IPS and ECTR, we're going to take advantage of in 5.2, which is the ability to drag and drop and link objects from, let's say, like a SolidWorks assembly, link it to a ticket or a workflow or things like that. So it allows you to, these not, let's call them not typical master objects in SAP, it still allows you to work with them and being able to link those to other objects, etc. And as you can see here, here's a ticket. Here's an IPS ticket, which is one of those GOS objects, as I said, which I'm able to, before you, even in 5.1, you could view it, but the functionality that we're looking at is drag and drop functionality, which is available in 5.2. One other thing that unfortunately, I don't have it configured, but I will explain in my system is, so we do have these different objects that we can create and add. For the addition, there is in the latest release, the one that is also available for EHP 7, you can now have a BOM as a master object that can be added to a folder. Whereas before, you could get to your BOM via the material within the Engineering Control Center. So for example, just to show everybody real quick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take one of these materials, I'll put it in the folder just so it's kind of sitting there. And now if I wanted to get to BOM information, I would have to go one level deeper and find the BOM, etc. Now this object will be able to be added to a folder standalone. In other words, it's not go to the material master, then go to the BOM. It will be considered as a master object in the Engineering Control Center. And again, there are a number of different other updates that exist. As Chris said, the Wiki Page is a very good indicator of all the new functionality that has been there, including some upgrades and fixes and so on. And then lastly, this is one just transitional change, which I think may or may not have been a question in the questions section of the webinar as well. When it comes to searching capabilities, there is one difference, which is queries, which used to exist within 5.1, is no longer there. It is now just all embedded within smart lists, which means that when you do a new search, you can select document as your new search, and we can say, like, for example, doc search here. And it brings up the document search as it exists in this format. And there is an extended format as well, which exactly mimics the way queries used to work. In other words, that same mask that queries used to work. Not only that, but this also gives you the ability to make searches as much in a tailored fashion to you. So being able to create your own search masks and being able to search on exactly the capabilities that you want to, as opposed to the queries, which was kind of just a standard searching form. Now it gives you the ability, yes, there are some standards, but you can also create your own. Or as part of the projects, people can create their own. Okay. So those are the topics that I wanted to quickly cover. And I think it's a good time to open it up since we have about 13 minutes left, I think.
Yep. So at this point, Matt, if you can unmute the participants, and then for the participants, we would just recommend to keep your line muted if you don't have questions. And if we already have your questions, then feel free to unmute and we'll explain it to you, but then you can also ask an additional question if you like. And I will try to moderate the best I can, but we thought, let's try this out to really keep it more interactive. So,
yep.
All right, maybe we'll start with, we'll go from the bottom. We'll start this way. So, Bill, I will just read the question out loud, and
sure.
Then again, Matt, maybe you can unmute the participant. But this question is from Andrew. There are a couple questions. So the first one,
yep.
Are the queries we have still compatible because we use custom classifications?
Yes, the answer. So all those things can be ported over, especially when it comes to your queries and things like that. They can still be used. It's just that one tab here is gone. But technically you can still have the same searches and so on. It'll take a little bit of that. It's going to be kind of that massaging during the transition period, because obviously when you're upgrading, there's also going to be other things that have changed, which it's just a changing config. It's more of an update rather than a change. So there will be some massaging, but yes, you can still, you don't have to, you shouldn't have to rebuild those queries again.
Okay. Andrew, did that answer the question? If not, just let us know.
So, and I think everyone's still muted.
It's
self-mute.
Yeah,
okay. Guys, I tried to unmute everybody, but it says that they're self-muted. So if the participants can just unmute themselves, they should be able.
Okay.
Perfect. And then we'll continue. So Andrew, another question, is there any documentation of performance improvements or comparisons of 5.2 with 5.1?
I don't know of any off the top of my head. I'm sure there may be something. That would be something that we could probably reach out to DSC on specific performance and improvements that they may or may not have documented.
Okay, we'll get back to that, Andrew. Mm-hmm. And then the other question, is there 5.2 version upgrade release notes, improvements, bug fixes, etc.?
Yes, there is. You can, as Chris mentioned before, that wiki page, which there is a link within the PowerPoint, that is actually a great source of everything that has changed. It's more, so it has visuals, it has very brief descriptions that more from a layman perspective or a user's perspective they should be able to understand. And then each one of those are linked to either the SAP notes that where those improvements came about from, or the influence portal request that basically pushed that update to be available. So a lot of them have links. A lot of the new improvements have direct links to their influence portal requests, which, again, for anybody else on this call, I want to strongly encourage you to use the influence portal, because basically the more recommendations and the more votes that already existing recommendations receive, the more that we can add into the future releases of the Engineering Control Center.
And for anybody that's not familiar with the influence portal, we can also send you that information.
Mm-hmm.
As Bill mentioned, we highly encourage every company to participate, because you can directly influence the development roadmap. So really
Correct.
great to leverage that. The other question here from Alan, can 5.2 query be configured to search for engineering records for IPS tickets?
Yes, it can. And actually, so the IPS tickets is actually a good point since I have that one right off the bat. If we look under, oops, that's object list, my fault. If I look under my smart list and I do a new search, there is a search for IPS ticket right here already built in. So I'm just going to call this one test ticket search. Okay. And then, oh, apparently I already did it before. But you can search by ticket number here. So, for example, I can do 61 star, and it'll show me all the tickets that are reside for that. And then if I, as we, like I said, it's basically a ticket, just like any other. So yes, you can. And building a different search mask or the different types of searches is actually pretty simple. Something that we could go over in the project. So this way, any searches that you would like to do, including with other objects, is pretty manageable from a customer or user perspective or an admin perspective.
Okay, excellent. Another question here from Rohan. We use standard SAP workflows. Is it possible to make a standard workflow function on ECTR? I'll take the first part. Leverage IPS. There's a very powerful recommendation, but all jokes aside, Bill, can you take that?
So with workflow functions within the Engineering Control Center, it really comes down to what portion of that. If it's just receiving your notifications and so on, or the tasks that you need to do, that can come through the SAP office, and there are more and more improvements being added to that. There is also different workflow functions that exist within the Engineering Control Center that directly basically interact with SAP's workflow. But again, it really depends on what you want to do. Is it fully functional? I would say it can basically either do it or navigate you in the direction of where you would need to do it. There isn't a, let's call it a workflow interface like there is the IPS one, like I'm showing here, that I have seen, but there is a way to get to those different workflow tasks, or, you know, make different decisions on those workflow tasks, whether that's through the SAP office or the different workflow functions here.
Okay, great. Here's another question. It's on IPS. So can we use IPS 5.0 on SAP ECTR 5.1?
Yes, you do have the ability to do so. You will, however, be limited to some of the functions that will be available in 5.2. One of those being the drag and drop functionality, which we intend to release very soon for the Engineering Control Center. That is not available in 5.1 for this sheer fact that 5.1 does not allow you to drag and drop links to GOS objects. So that's a 5.2 only function, which means that our tool can't leverage that functionality. So,
okay.
Yep.
And then again, the main highlight, if you are on 5.1 with end of maintenance, end of 2021, recommendation regardless from SAP, but also the partner ecosystem, is to upgrade to 5.2 for these benefits we've discussed here. Let's see, a lot of good questions coming in. Maybe this one, can you explain the naming of ECTR 5.1 or 5.2 versus ECTR 1.1? I think that's a very good question.
Yep, and so 5.2, so anything in the 5.1, well, even going back as 5.0, 5.1, 5.2, all deal with ECC releases of the SAP Engineering Control Center. In other words, interfacing with an SAP environment that is still running on an ECC 6 backend. If you transition into the S/4HANA backend SAP system, then ECTR is 1.0 and now currently 1.1 releases of the Engineering Control Center interface. So in other words, 5.2 and 1.1 are very similar let's call it in functionality, configuration, availability. It's just one is built for the ECC environment, which is the 5.2, and one is built for the S/4HANA environment, which is the 1.1.
Okay, very good. Then here's the question. I think it's very relevant. So question reads, after the Siemens Team Center collaboration with SAP and the overlap of functionalities, do you think ECTR would get impacted as long-term tool for use? So I can answer that. The answer is no. So there are two very powerful options available from SAP. There's the Engineering Control Center, as we've known it for many years. There's also the SAP the SAP Team Center by Siemens Solution, so aka Team Center, which SAP is supporting. Now, the Engineering Control Center is a long-term tool from SAP. It's under maintenance until 2040, and it is continuously being improved, further developed, and enhanced, so it is not impacted whatsoever or going away. The other side to the story is for any customers that are on Siemens Team Center that are also utilizing SAP. Of course, there's now a very powerful partnership, including integrations between Team Center and SAP. So in the short, concise version, you get the best of both worlds, but you can go directly to SAP and the SAP partners to leverage that technology. Then maybe jumping back to ECTR, I know we have about 2 minutes left, but Bill, this question, how does Robocopy transition with the 5.2 release?
So good question. With Robocopy, so again, this is gonna talk into a little bit of history. So the previous method for distributing configurations within the Engineering Control Center in earlier 5.1 releases was using some sort of Robocopy scheme, which would take your configuration where you'd have it stored on a golden machine somewhere, and then that would be distributed to your users. Even in 5.1, I think it was 13 or so, 5.1 to 13, somewhere around there, they instituted what was known as the backend configuration, which this was a method of your configuration is done and then uploaded into SAP, stored in a specific DIR, and then when users were to log in, they would then, the first step on the login would be to download that configuration to their local machine in the roaming folder, which this way means, or the local folder, sorry, which then means that whenever that user logs in, they have the configuration that has been uploaded by the admin. So in other words, there's no more Robocopy topics that need to be handled. It's all handled directly within the Engineering Control Center and managed by SAP's version control and everything else, which makes it a very nice. Basically, you're now not only able to manage your documents in SAP, but you can even manage the configuration of your Engineering Control Center inside of SAP. And yes, thank you, Andrew, for that 5.1.14. I appreciate that. I was going to say I thought it was 13, but it could have been 14. Thank you.
Andrew, the other question, this video will be available, the presentation slides as well. You asked about distributing this to management or other colleagues, so we'll provide that. And there actually are a few other really good questions, so we're going to collect all the questions. We're going to get these answered by Bill and his team. And then we will follow up with all of you, and you will get all the information as a package. And we are at time. So as always, we want to try and be respectful of everybody's time and give you back 9 minutes here before your next meetings or before your lunch break. But we want to thank you for joining us here. And again, we appreciate the interactive nature. And with that, we'll close out the webinar. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.